Good morning, and let's start. I just started the recording, session recording. So consider day one, right? I think Satish, you already there on other sessions for a few days, right? You are aware the approach how we run these sessions on Azure. In similar fashion, we'll try to run it on AWS as well. And Sherin, I think you have got all the course content, right? So let me quickly go over that and see what we try to cover in this training.
Yeah.
Right. I'll go to AWS. These details were still not updated by me, so I had to take out time and update it. So, AWS. Right. So we are planning to cover two things here. One is your AWS Sysops, which is your admin, okay, and your AWS architect. I'm not covering professional here. I'm trying to cover associate part, right? So what is associate and what is professional? Right. Professional is someone who understand the customer requirement and derive the solution end to end. Right. When it comes to associate, will assist the professional wherever he needs some help in terms of identifying technical solutions and identifying, I'll say, performing some R&D and getting things done on the in terms of AWS solution. Your associate will come into picture. When it comes to Sysops is majorly focus on managing the existing infrastructure within the AWS and what kind of day-to-day operations that he can perform within the AWS that he will take care. Right. So I'll try to cover these two course codes. Okay, Sysops and Architect. AWS Sysops certification. If you are trying to achieve, right, it costs you $150 for Sysops. Okay, and if you're trying to architect certification, we get another $150 for architect. This is associate. So these two certifications you will be able to appear after this training. And there is another one, professional certification, which is double the cost of your associate, and you need extensive hands-on experience in all the areas what I mentioned earlier, right? So you have to have a business knowledge, you have to have a technical knowledge, you have to have solutioning knowledge in the sense you in traditional way also you must have some designing and deriving a solutions experience in order to crack your professional training or professional certifications, I would say, right? And that costs you 300. It's entirely different. So as I said, this is not covered in our training, right? Technical wise, we'll be able to cover, but in terms of applying that architect thought process and applying your security standards, engaging the customer, understand the requirement, and come up with the solutioning, will not be able to cover in our training. So let's go ahead and check what we're going to cover. Basic to AWS, right? So, and your AWS networking, computing, and then your high availability solutions and scaling, then your day-to-day operations using systems manager, your storage part, databases, and your monitoring and reporting day-to-day operations and implementing security, then your development side of things. So till here, implementing security is part of your admin and architect. When it comes to designing and deploying microservice solutions is kind of add-on, which is part of your, I'll say, DevOps kind of thing, I would say. And in migration services, altogether a different job role. If you see in your Naukri or anywhere, you will see a couple of job roles mentioned as migration expert, AWS, Azure, GCP, whatever, right? And developer tools and your microservices solutions are two additional things what we're trying to cover. These two are part of your major developer day-to-day operations. We'll try to help developers in a way how they want to perform their day-to-day operations and what kind of tasks that you perform to help your developers who are working in product development, right? And associated automations and other day-to-day operations. So that's the overall objective of this training. And in initial 2 or 3 sessions, like you have seen, okay, Wasim is it's kind of on and on off repetition in his training. So Satish, you have seen Azure initial 2 3 sessions, similar sort of thing here as well. So we'll try to cover the little basics on on-premise, how we do our day-to-day operations, or what kind of day-to-day operations that we perform in traditional way, how the traditional way looks like, how AWS is different than your traditional way of operations, right? All those things we'll try to cover, and then we'll jump on to AWS from, let's say, Friday onwards. Okay, so let's do a different way, right? So let's make it this as an interactive. If you have a huge number of people, it's hard to make it interactive because that's noisy. But we are limited audience here, only 4 of us, so we can make it as interactive. In case if you are not able to understand, right? Okay, just ask me, and I'll try to explain it once again. And if you have something, just share it across so that will be recorded for your reference as well. Make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So before we go ahead and talk about your AWS or Azure or GCP or any other cloud platform, okay, let's understand who is the top contender here. Okay, Gartner, Cloud Magic Quadrants. Okay, let's see. As of July 2021. So these are the cloud vendors or cloud providers recognized by Gartner for their recommendations and stuff. So what Gartner will do, will provide analysis and okay, the top leaders or top contenders on specific areas. Okay, if you take cloud, if you take your any specific tool, if you take any monitoring, or if you take any developer tools, or if you take any sort of CI/CD operations, or if you take any sort of physical servers, any sort of IT related stuff, if you want to identify who is doing best and what all the major pros and cons for that particular vendor or a tool or a product or a solution, you will be able to figure it out in Gartner. So as per Gartner, the leaders current in the market are these three, and looks like Alibaba Cloud is having nice vision. Maybe in a coming year or two, they will be promoted into a leader section. Okay, so nice players are something for who are doing good at a beginner level, and then who has a long vision or a goals as far as their business or product or a tool is concerned, and who are actually leading that particular I'll say tool or a product or a cloud. Here we're talking about your cloud vendors. So these are the vendors who are actually leading the market currently. And challengers means who are actually falling behind. They raised up to a certain level. After that, they stopped performing. Those are challenges. Now, in our case, all the three all the three major cloud providers are in the leader section. Right now, we are focusing on AWS. That doesn't mean you have to work on only AWS. You are looking for only AWS jobs. It is not going to work in that way. You have to at least have two cloud provider knowledge on a day-to-day hands-on experience. Okay, so that you'll be able to crack your job easily. Why? Because if you go to any sort of a job role, okay, let's go to Indeed. Try for GCP. SaaS preferred, GCP certified. Yeah, cloud DevOps. It's not mentioned clearly what kind of cloud that are looking for. And let's see AWS. It's purely mentioned programming with AWS architecture. Cloud support engineer. Let's see, at least they mentioned Azure. No, it's okay in India, right? So let's check in Naukri. Looking for GCP that we mentioned AWS Azure also as a keywords to find out the job role. Yeah. Let's see. AWS must have, good have cloud infrastructure knowledge. They haven't mentioned any other cloud, but it's good to have other cloud infrastructure knowledge as well. Okay. And let me show you job profiles, what I posted. In fact, what I shared across. Mm, exactly. Give me a moment. Okay. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Mm, it is no longer accepting the invites. I think we pause the role hiring for this particular role, but let's see what it is. Right. This is what we created and posted recently. Right. So we need at least two technologies where people are working on it. So because we have current customers onboarded in what I'll say, current customers onboarded in Azure, AWS, and we're trying to pitch in for GCP as well. So we want to have professionals who are working on at least two technologies, so that it will be easy for me to uh, train on the other technology, I would say, right? So same thing, a market is going. So it's not just our organization; it's across the globe, like across the uh, job roles. If you see, the majority of the people are asking for multi-cloud professionals, right? So and moreover, out of these three, I would recommend at least two skills you need to have in your CV, right? So anyway, your leader is AWS here, right? It's since beginning AWS is in the market leader section, right? And then Azure is trying to reach AWS somehow from last few years, and you'll see it is moving towards the topper section, but there is a huge gap, so it takes time. Even if Microsoft is trying to go into that position, it's not that easy job to swap it here, right? And moreover, both the clouds has, or all the, in fact all the three clouds has their own advantages, disadvantages when you are looking at business benefits and technical benefits as well, right? So irrespective of who is providing the cloud services, right? If I go back to here, your cloud vendors will offer the services in the following ways, right? Your infrastructure as a service and platform as a service and software as a service, and other one is disaster recovery as a service. Okay, and one small topic called IAC, infrastructure as a code. It is not a service, but people are currently looking for this kind of automations. So infrastructure as a code, that is a little different. So if I go back to job role here, do you see any sort of skill? IS pass, it's mentioned, and Docker Kubernetes, okay. Let's not mention the IAC part here, but we do have IAC requirement, which is your coding on the infrastructure side. I will explain this in a few minutes, but before that, let's try and understand your infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and other areas. Now, if you are working in a traditional way, right? Let's focus on working HP DL 380 Gen 11 or a Gen 10. What is the latest? I don't still remember because I worked till Gen 10. I'm assuming 11 might have uh, released into market. This I worked on, I think 2016 or 17. After that, I never worked on HP hardware, right? And VMware hypervisor will be ESXi, I call it as. And what I will do, I will create a virtual machine. How to create a VM? VM1, VM2, VM3, and so on. You can create multiple VMs, right? Based on your requirement. Some of the VMs are pretty small and tiny. Some of them are too big based on the requirement. Windows, right? And then Linux, example, and then Linux. Now all three servers are three independent servers. Your users can log in remotely into all the three servers, right? Over the internet or over the private network or over the application API also. You will be able to access these servers. Now, as a traditional VMware or traditional system administrator, your responsibility is managing this VMware, managing this virtual machine, Linux OS, Windows OS, On top of that, if you have some application, right, installing and configuring that application, and backend hardware, log in via ILO, right? If you are aware, there is an ILO called integrated lights out for HP server to log in remotely and check the health check of your physical server, and all these things falling under your system administrator role. Next.
What is that hypervisor? Can you just brief about that one also? VMware hypervisor.
Sure.
Terms on YouTube. Like new.
No issues. Yeah. So as a system administrator, you are responsible to manage the whole thing. Okay. Physically, you don't go to the data center and look for this hardware and troubleshoot the hardware failures. That is not your job. Other than that, remotely, whatever the operations that you can perform related to system, that you will be able to perform, right? And regarding the hypervisor, VMware will get a lot of my videos here. Okay, I'll go to playlist. You might have seen all these things, but just okay. So I have around 47 videos related to traditional VMware, in fact 43 videos on the full course, right? So I'll share this across to you on maybe on your WhatsApp after this call, so you can have a look. This will tell you what is hypervisor in the physical world, how you are using that hypervisor to create a virtual machines. Just for your reference, I shared in the chat. You'll be able to copy it. So how this virtualization or a hypervisor will help you to interact with one hardware, try to run multiple virtual machines, right? Is a base software which will be used to run your virtual machines, in fact. Okay, and more in detail, technical details, you'll have 40 videos that I've recorded, I think, back in 2019. So you'll be able to refer that. It's not mandatory to go through all of them to learn AWS or Azure or GCP, but this is how your virtualization has started. Okay, this is base virtualization. Okay, and you'll install a server. If you install a server, on top of that, if you install a OS, you will be able to install only one Windows server. Now I want to run 3 servers. Then you get one base hypervisor software which will act as a medium to run multiple VMs on a same hardware. In your local laptop also, if you are working for IBM or working for any other organizations, by default, you will get Oracle VirtualBox or VMware Works, I think, Workstation, right? And then you'll have Citrix Zen, right? And Red Hat VirtualBox is also one of the tools where you will see on your desktop a small icon. If you double click, it will automatically start your Linux server. Your base is Windows. On top of that, you're trying to execute some small Linux tiny OS for your testing and other operations. That is also kind of virtualization. So virtualization is of two types. One is type 1 virtualization, where you will use it on your local desktops and laptops. Type 2 virtualization, where you will use it in the bare metal on a physical hardware in your data centers. So this is type 2 hypervisor, what we install on physical hardware and try to run all the virtual machines. So the major point here is, as a system administrator, you will perform all these 3 tasks or 4 tasks or a number of tasks what I defined here. Okay, now on top of that, if I have SQL database on top of Windows, I have installed SQL. Okay, so normally you'll have your SQL DBA who will perform SQL DBA who will perform the SQL side of the operations, and you have an application installed on Linux, 2 applications. Both the application are talking with your SQL server. You'll have an app support team to take care of this app support and stuff. Now, this is traditional. That is the reason you'll see majorly you'll see n number of job roles that are visible in the picture, and people are working across the organization to support you on multiple technologies and multiple roles. Okay, and your primary role is system administrator. Now, same thing, same approach. Customer is decided to go on to the cloud using some of the cloud computing, cloud offering mechanisms. So one of the mechanism is infrastructure as a service. So in infrastructure as a service, what happens? Let's go to infrastructure as a service. HP DL create is Zen10. I don't uh, conclude that this is the hardware that cloud vendors are using in the backend. No, I'm just giving you as a reference. And on top of that, you definitely need to have hypervisor. Our primary focus is on AWS, right? AWS Zen. Okay, they are using Zen as a hypervisor in the backend. And on top of that, you will be able to deploy machines. EC2 VM1, EC2 instance 1, I'm just mentioning as EC2 VM1, EC2 VM2, EC2 VM3, and so on. Now, same thought process. It's Windows, Linux, another Linux. Now, your system admin role has been changed to AWS Sysops administrator. Okay, what sort of operations that you perform? Because traditionally you are working as system administrator, and I've said these are the operations that you'll perform. When it comes to AWS Sysops administrator, what kind of operations that you'll perform? Hardware is not in your control. One thing is clear. Hypervisor is not in your control. Another thing is clear. What is there in your scope? Creating these virtual machines. Okay. And on top of that, if you have SQL Server, application team will handle the application part. So your SQL DBA, who is there in the traditional on-premise, if your organization is too big, enterprise level organization, you will retain the same SQL DBA to perform the same task here, and you will retain the same application support team to perform same task here, and your system administrator need to perform virtual machine management, installing the application SQL Server, and giving that to respective individuals who will support going forward. Now, as a AWS Sysops administrator, what is removed from your headache is your physical server management and your hypervisor management, like your vCenter, VMware, ESXi, or Hyper-V, Microsoft Hyper-V, and then your Nutanix AHV. All these hypervisors are not in your scope to operate them on a daily basis. So that is provided by your AWS. They will manage it in the backend. You don't worry about it. Make sense? Okay, so this is where infrastructure as a service. What you are asking, I need infrastructure. Take this infrastructure. No, what is there in the backend, you don't worry. We will take care of it. That is what AWS is saying. Clear? Any question? When it comes to platform as a service, same structure, same application, same architecture and everything, but this is out of scope for you. This is also out of scope for you. This EC2 instance is also out of scope for you. SQL is in scope. You will operate your SQL. Application is in scope. Application is in scope. How? PaaS, platform as a service, right? So when I say platform as a service, you need a SQL database, right? So I will offer in the name of RDS, relational databases. You select the SQL. How? If I go simply here and AWS RDS, I'll simply go to RDS. I'll show you, okay, what all the things that we can perform later on, but just to show you, create a database. SQL is needed now. Just select the SQL and proceed with next operations and done. That's it, right? So I'll create a RDS. I don't bother whether it is running a Windows server or Linux server in the backend because I need a database. That's it. I am not responsible for backend servers. I am not responsible for rest of the things. So all these things will fall under your AWS scope. Okay, and what is your responsibility as a AWS Sysops administrator managing these green ones? How? You know how to deploy SQL using RDS and get that connection string, share it with your developer. An application, you know how to deploy Lambda function, you know how to deploy your Elastic Beanstalk, right? The both of them doesn't require any server to be deployed. They'll deploy the server in the backend, but you don't need to worry about what is the server, what is the size, what's the configuration, and all those things. You need an application. This is the application. Please use it, right? So that is your AWS Sysops administrator routine. Daily day-to-day routine task is managing these PaaS components. These are pre-configured and readily available to consume, and the backend hardware and everything will be taken care by your cloud provider. Is clear?
Yeah, it's clear.
So moving on to other side. When it comes to software as a service. Okay, when it comes to software as a service, again, your physical hardware, hypervisor, your virtual machine, all these things are not in your scope. Your SQL server, your application, no, none of these are in your scope. Then what you will do with this? As a AWS Sysops administrator, what you will do in the SaaS modeling? Let's say there is an application. Okay, the application is running with web server. Yeah, and then on the back end, there is an app server. On the back end, there's a DB server. So one of the user is trying to connect to the web over the www. abc.com. Just an example. When they are trying to use that URL, the request will hit the web server and it will display some page content, and user is decided to book something and initiated the book request, went to the database, and on the screen it is showing your order has been confirmed. Just an example. Right now, the same thing, you need to send an email to this is user email ID. Right? You browsed it, you logged in and placed the order. Order confirmation need to send it to abc.com. Now, who will, let's imagine this entire setup is in AWS and email needs to be sent from your virtual machine or EC2 instance to in this email ID. So the medium is your SNS service, simple notification service. SNS service is running on top of, let's say, one Windows server, and it is running on top of it, right? Now, once you configure the SNS, you are not even bothered about how that SNS is configured. I am bothered about allow abc.com request. Okay, so allow abc.com request on SNS. I'll configure so that it will allow the request to go to abc.com from the AWS. Who will interact here via SNS? How this SNS is configured, I don't know. How this SNS is running, or maybe on the back end there is a one or two or multiple servers, but how it is functioning, I don't know. Because I'm least bothered about all the existing stuff. I'm very much interested about how this is functioning, how I can use it for my business. Right? That is where your SaaS model will come. Another example, your ServiceNow ticketing tool. Okay, if you have worked on any customer environment, you will see ServiceNow as a major ticketing tool for all your ticket management within the customer place. The ServiceNow will be deployed on top of this application might be, it will talk to your DB and so on. Okay, it will interact with all of this. This end product is my goal. So how I will access it? Very simple. You come here and simply ask ServiceNow. Okay, you'll get one URL. Let's say abc.servicenow.com. Just an example. See, if you have that abc.servicenow.com, it will automatically take you to the page. That request will hit this ServiceNow, and the backend, your AWS servers will hit, and you will get a page responded here. There's no abc.servicenow.com domain, so that is the reason it is not responding. But ideally, what we need to understand here is your SaaS services are purely dependent on AWS services, but as an administrator, you will not perform any sort of operations on the backend databases and servers. Okay, that has to be taken care by AWS itself. User is very much interested in allowing the traffic towards internet, right? If that is not the case, you need to uh, adopt this SNS, which can send the order confirmation emails to the respective individuals, right? That is where your SaaS model will come into picture. Any other examples for SaaS? Wasim, Satish said. In your past experience, any other SaaS model examples? Satish, you there? Or Wasim, you there?
Mm,
Sorry, I'm not able to hear you. Okay, something on the chat. No, okay, all right. So, service now ticketing tool is an SaaS example. Your Salesforce is also example for SaaS product. Okay, and there is another one called SendGrid. Is also another SaaS model. Yeah. So let's see SendGrid in AWS. Okay. What is the SendGrid? What it can do? You see, SendGrid email delivery service is a SaaS model. You don't need to worry about how to send an emails to your customers who are using who are using your website and services. Your SendGrid will take care of that email services. Okay, so this is again a third party SaaS product, and they will charge you not based on the number of servers. Okay, how many servers that you are running, what is the size, what is the storage, and all those things. Sorry, we don't really charge you on those numbers. We will charge you at around 40K emails per month. Will be $9.95 per month for 40,000 emails, and 1,000 emails over the base package. This is the price, and so on. That price breakage will be provided. So this is how they will charge you for your SaaS product. For your server, they will charge you per server. This is the price. SQL per SQL instance virtually. This is the charge. And for SaaS, per business model. Service now per user. How many users that you are trying to allocate or log in to work on their tickets in service now per user licensing. And here also the licensing model is little different. And here the licensing model is per 40K mails. Right? This is a billing model. So as a Azure administrator or AWS administrator or GCP administrator, okay, if you are talking about cloud computing basics, these three will remain same. Okay, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS will remain same. It is not going to change. What is changed? Your day-to-day operations will change. Okay, as an administrator, you are responsible for this whole thing. You are responsible for this whole thing, and you are responsible for this whole thing. Meaning, you will not work on the hardware. You will not work on the hardware, but as an administrator, you will set up a SendGrid if required. You will set up a service now if required. You will set up a SNS service if required, or you will set up a SQL server if required. Lambda functions you will deploy as per customer requirement, and so on. These are all your day-to-day operations as part of your AWS Sysops engineer. Clear?
So how it is charged for platform as a service? I just missed that one.
Platform as a service, it is not a server, it is a RDS, right? Your
Yeah, yeah.
your SQL will be allocated with, let's say, 2 CPU and 4 GB memory and 50 GB hard drive. So for this, $0.1 example per hour. Now, if you are increasing 2 to 4 CPU and 4 GB to 8 GB RAM, this might become a $0.2. So what is there in the backend? How much capacity that they are running in the backend, where we don't really understand. Getting my point?
Oh, it's clear. So it is based on the the
Usage.
usage of the database, right?
Resources, yeah, resources.
Yeah.
Okay. So for Lambda functions, how much CPU, how much memory, how long you executed the Lambda function, let's say 10 milliseconds that you have executed, and 8 GB memory and 4 CPU, then your bill will be 0.000691 USD per transaction. That is how your Lambda function billing works. Let me show you. Anyway, I'll show you when you'll see 128 MB, 0.000021 is the dollar price per millisecond. Million transactions are per millisecond. Okay, if you are using 10 GB memory, right, and this is the price for 1 millisecond of execution. Okay, this billing will be difficult to understand, but this is how it is designed for Lambda functions especially. Okay, all these things are falling under your PaaS. Right. So moving on to disaster recovery as a service, what happens in majority of the customer places, you will have on-premise one, and you will have on-premise two different data centers in two different places. Traditionally, what you are doing, you are replicating all your data from here to here. This is primary site. This is a secondary site. Right. So from primary site, you have a bunch of servers. You are replicating the data onto your secondary site for disaster recovery purposes. Okay. So if, give me a second, if you are replicating data from primary to secondary, means secondary is not doing anything, just holding the data from your primary. Now, for this particular data center, from this data center to this data center, let's say 300 miles apart, and you're keeping this data center as ideal because you're not utilizing it, just keeping some devices where you're dumping the data. Now, what I want to look for is, I don't want to go away from this on-premise. I want to stay here, but this is actually eating my most of the money. So I want to get rid of this secondary one. Instead of that, I want to move to AWS so that whatever the data that I'm replicating currently onto here, from next time onwards, or maybe during the next project takeover or something, I will try and configure your secondary as AWS, which is secondary, and whatever the data that is being dumped here, it will automatically synchronize to AWS. So this is acting as a DR site. How this functionality of data upload and download will happen, right? Your AWS will charge you for incoming, will not charge you any incoming traffic, but you need to make sure you have a good bandwidth between your on-premise and AWS in order to upload this data on a timely manner. Right? This is disaster recovery as a service. We will only provide a DR site. Okay, you don't have any servers, you don't have any applications running, you don't have any databases running. It's simple DR target where you will dump the data. That's it. That is your disaster recovery as a service. In case if this completely goes wrong, you have all the data in AWS. You can spin up a machine in AWS itself by taking some time. When in the event of primary is completely vanished from the picture. Make sense? That is your disaster recovery as a service. So any example tools for disaster recovery as a service? Yes, we have our tools available in the market. One is Zerto. Okay. Zerto disaster recovery. It can be used to replicate the data across multiple cloud platforms from on-premise. Okay, let's see AWS disaster recovery plan. Backup and restore, pilot, warm up, archive. They have defined some strategy, but that is not the service what they are offering. Disaster recovery services. Okay, Elastic disaster recovery, setup, test, operate, and failover. Okay, so this is something they can come up with in order to establish the security from your on-premise to AWS and another cloud to AWS. And in between the AWS, you want to have some protection. Then you can use the service, disaster recovery as a service. One of the example is Jerato, which is third party. Another example is your Elastic disaster recovery. So these are the two services we will use. This can be used for all the three operations, multi-cloud, on-premise, and within the AWS. It can provide the disaster recovery. Right? So other than that, there is another concept called infrastructure as a code. Right? There is no correlation between your infrastructure as a code and other services what we are selling. Right? What the other services what we are discussing so far, in other words. Right? So infrastructure as a code means, let's say you are working as a AWS Sysops administrator and you have been asked to update the AWS cloud formation template, right? Which is a piece of code that you will execute. When you execute that, your servers will automatically get created, or your services will automatically get created. Your databases will automatically get created. Now, how that infrastructure as a code working? Simple. You will keep your code in a separate repository. Let's say GitHub or AWS repos, right? And have code commit is your AWS repos where you can keep the code, and you will have the whole AWS as a picture. And what happens? It will execute and it will automatically deploy the code in your machine, and it in turn create server, storage, network, and monitoring. Right? These are the four services that you want to deploy. You don't want to do it manually by logging into the portal. No, we will run via your IAC deployment. So when you execute this code, automatically these services will be started. Right? You don't need to do anything. It's just your cloud formation template, or you'll have your Terraform and other third-party services like your PowerShell, Bash Shell, and AWS CLI. All these things can interact with AWS to deploy the code or deploy the infrastructure using simple instructions like this. Right? These also we'll see down the line when we are talking about other services. This we will try to test it extensively as part of our training. So these are the 5 different things I want to convey. as part of your cloud journey. These are the things that we need to understand mandatorily, right? And we will focus on these three areas in majority of the cases. And rest all as added advantage or added benefit to the customer. Make sense? Any questions before we jump on to other topic? No, all good.
Yeah, all good.
So for tomorrow, what we will do, we'll understand how your on-premise looks like and how you will use same thing in AWS. If you know on-premise operations, you'll be able to understand AWS side of things very easily. Right? So that's the action item for tomorrow. I think Wasim, you're good to log in at 8:30 from tomorrow onwards.
Yes, I will log in by 8:30. Sure.
8:30 is good, right? Satish?
Yeah.
Satish, you're good for 8:30?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So let's connect regularly at 8:30 because the other one is completely delayed, Wasim. So I'm really sorry because that is not majorly from our side. So the people I think they're not able to join the time because they're from the different geography. So Dubai people, it's too early. So that's the reason they're unable to join. But what we will do is we'll continue this as it is. I'll share the recordings across a different Vimeo portal, right? So what I will do. Sorry. Yeah, please tell me. Sharon, you're saying something?
No, it's not from my.
Okay. So AWS, I'll say 14. I'll upload the videos on this folder on your Vimeo, right? So Sharon and Satish, I think you already know how to access it. So you will have to go to groups and 14. At the moment, there is no group as such, but vimeo.com groups AWS 14 is the one you need to access once I provide the access. Okay, once this video is created, I'll share that video across to you guys, and going forward we'll use this 14, and also what I'll do, I'll add the other people into the 14. Whoever has missed the previous sessions, they'll be able to access this latest videos at least, so they can refer them when they are practicing. So that is the plan. I'll upload everything in this video itself so that people can refer the same. Okay, with this I'll stop here. If you guys have any questions, I can help you with. Okay, able to understand, Satish? I think you are there, and Wasim, we connected and talked a few times. It's not a big deal. So Sharon, if you are able to understand the concepts easily, yeah, we'll go in the same phase.
Yeah, we can move in the same phase.
Right then. So let me stop the recording here, and I'll see you tomorrow same time.